Welcome to Emerging Franchise Brands, the podcast that introduces you to the visionary founders of America's fastest growing franchise opportunities. We'll also hear from industry pros as they share insights on what it really takes to achieve the elusive milestone of 100 plus locations. I am your host, Frank Fumey, founder of I9 Sports, and my 20-year journey from inception to acquisition has given me a unique perspective on how to succeed in franchising. Join me as we welcome today's guest. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. On today's show, I have Scott Morgenroth, who is the Director of Account Management at Listen360 and former manager of franchise business coaching at I9 Sports and dear friend. Scott?
So proud to be here.
Scott, it is wonderful to have you on. There's so many reasons why I wanted to have you on the show here. First and foremost, you've been a dear friend for a long time, and you have such great experience that with me, we have a lot of history. Mm-hmm. And I thought it would be awesome to have the audience hear what life was like for you as somebody who came into a company that was emerging, because a lot of our audience are emerging franchise founders and they're trying to figure out how to grow their company. They have a lot of challenges. They know that they need to grow beyond themselves. They need to make those first initial hires. And you came in 2006 during a very, well, I wouldn't say tumultuous time, but you came in right as we were starting this new generation of bringing people in. So that's the first reason why I thought you provide so much value. And then the second thing is, as director of account management, Listen360, you've had an incredible experience of working with so many franchisors that are getting customer feedback. And I think this, again, Listen360 is a phenomenal service of getting customer feedback, and more importantly, how to apply it to grow your business. And I think every franchisor needs to hear about Listen360 and what you guys do. So we got a lot to cover.
Excellent.
All right, so let's go back in time. So let's go back to 2006. And so at that time, I9 Sports, we had just turned the corner where we stopped losing money. We put an emphasis on, needing to have better training tools, supporting better, having a much better operations team. And actually, we realized right before you came aboard that business coaching was a much bigger aspect than I foresaw. I thought it was all about, how to teach them how to run a sports league. And when you came in, it was kind of a dawn of a new era. So why don't we talk about what life was like when you came in 06 and what your initial feelings were?
So I came into I9 Sports and making a career change. I moved from, I was coaching soccer and wanted to get into the business world. And I didn't know exactly how I was going to do that. And very grateful that you gave me the opportunity to come in and take what I learned coaching athletes and apply it to coaching business owners. And I didn't really know at the time that there was such a strong correlation. And I kind of learned that over and over again in my career in franchising. So very grateful that you gave me the opportunity. Back then, I remember being in the very largest training class that you had to date and kind of being thrown into it.
Right.
And trying to figure it out. The sports side of it obviously came very easy to me. And that allowed me to focus on other things. So
that was August 2006, I believe, was that training class.
Yeah, and I was hired probably July of 2006.
By the way, that sounds very me, by the way, very on brand. It's like, oh, by the way, I have a huge training class and you're starting now. Yeah. Well, Scott, one of the things that I admired most about you from the get-go, I don't know if you remember this, but when I was interviewing for your position, you interviewed me. And I was taken back because I was so used to, you interview somebody and you do the whole Q&A thing. Yeah. But you put it back on me. And it made me feel like, I got to get this guy part of my team, because you were so thoughtful and you thought through about our company, and you were so genuinely excited about the opportunity. And of course, that made me excited too to bring you on. I knew that you were going to elevate our company. It was what we desperately needed. And what intrigued me was not that you came from the sports background, but you made it very clear, like you understood that whether you're coaching sports or coaching, business owners, there's a lot of common threads those two types.
Yeah, not every day an opportunity comes around that fit what I thought my career path would be. And I put a lot of effort into figuring out how to uncover if it was the right opportunity, because I believe that the people that you work with are extremely important. And I also came from a very prestigious place, so I wanted to move on to another great step. I didn't want to just take a step and then go sideways or whatever. I wanted to take a step and go forward. I did put a lot of energy into figuring out, were you the right step for me. I do remember, I had a pretty rigorous schedule coaching, and you guys took the opportunity to meet me on a Saturday. And I thought that was awesome. That means you must really, appreciate my background and want me. And I wanted to be in a place that I felt comfortable and the people did want me and felt valued. So that was my opportunity to try to figure out, was this the right spot? Again, you learn things about yourself. And I didn't know I was really doing that at the time. But you're right, it translates to business coaching. Trying to figure out each individual franchisee, what makes them tick, how they develop their own sense of worth and goals going forward. You put a lot of energy into figuring out some of those conversations before you even have them. So yeah, I appreciate that you did see that from me. I've heard you say that before, and that makes me proud. And it's something that I've always done in the interview process with new employees. I'm pretty tough and ask some pretty pointed questions to try to get to know, are they going to be the right fit for the business going forward as well?
Well, Scott, one of the things that I absolutely love about you is you can be tough, you can be firm, yet you're probably one of the most empathetic people I've ever met in my life. And if I had to put anybody on Mount Rushmore of I-9 sports, you would certainly be on that for sure.
I appreciate that.
You played such a huge role in our company for such a long period of time. I'd like to go back to what you felt like. So there are founders that are hearing this that are trying to grow and they're trying to hire people. And when you came aboard, it was like right after a scary time. Like we were just probably about, I don't know, maybe 9 months removed from close to going out of business. So you didn't experience that. We were starting to turn the corner. But what was life like when you're working in an office of, was it maybe 5 of us, 6 of us?
I've always been an athlete, and one of the things that I thought I would miss getting into the business world is competing. And you showed us in I-9 Sports, we were competing. We're competing on the same team. We're competing to drive the business forward. And back then, it was a close-knit family who were all trying to do the right thing for the franchisees and give them the tools necessary for them to succeed. It was a unique market. It's not something that really wasn't done before. So being able to forge that path forward was an excellent thing, and it was one of those pursuits of passion. And I don't know if you know this, but quite simply, we know that it was your dream, but it was also our dream as well. And somehow we attached to you. I don't know if you meant to do that on purpose, or if it's just your electric personality that connects people, but I felt as much in the dream as you did, and I'm sure the others did as well.
Oh, thank you so much. That was so nice of you. While it was my dream, I did know that I knew I had to hire for my weakness, and I knew that I was only going to get there with a great team. And when I first started, I brought along the people who had run the sports leagues with me, and they weren't all necessarily the right people. So one of the scary shifts was I need to bring in strangers I don't know, but I did know that I needed to integrate the vision and be willing to do whatever it takes. Like I have to roll up my sleeves and work just as hard as everybody else, because I think that is really critical for a founder, not just to, talk the talk. You have to walk it.
Absolutely.
And we walked it every day together.
Absolutely. What you set up, we ended up doing with the franchisees. I can remember so many times jumping in and leading a parents' talk prior to their opening kickoff, doing whatever it took, laying down cones, getting the field set up, rushing the Home Depot because we needed a bolt cutter to open up a field that wasn't ready, when you see the leader take that kind of action themselves, it's very easy to follow suit.
I do remember that time we were in Palm Beach and we did one of the biggest grand openings we'd ever done. We did it together.
Yeah.
We stayed up late at night helping the franchisee, sorting bags of jerseys, and we did, you just do whatever it takes, especially when you're, a small operation, you're trying to get things started.
Absolutely.
What, reflecting back on the early days, what would you say maybe are some of the more valuable lessons you learned about your role of franchise business coaching?
Yeah. I didn't have a ton of experience in business coaching itself.
Right.
And I kind of understood what I was good at and realized I could provide value right away by leveraging my experience in the fields of sports, running the programs. I could give some insight and jump right in. So my goal with every franchisee was, how do I give them value? How do I make them trust me? My end goal is to be a trusted advisor for each franchise owner, and that doesn't happen overnight. So what are the small steps to get in? And when you're starting out, you don't have a large toolbox to pull from. So I really went back to my experience and said, I've had this experience, this is what we've done. And I learned a ton from the operations manual and other people that were in the role with me. So really, how do we go forward and help a franchise owner as much as we can take care of the important things that help them run the business.
And how do you make that shift? Because when you have, depending on the person's stage of owning their franchise, right? You're doing the initial training. You did a lot of the initial training classes, and in that mode, you're in training mode, right? So it's more one-way conversation. Here's what you need to do, and then you go into a coaching mode, and it's more like, hey, you're encouraging them to do what they need to do, but then you also have a consultant hat, right? And you're diagnosing problems. How do you know which lever to push?
Well, it's where you are at the moment. So from a training standpoint, you're trying to get a lot of information to the masses and trying to get them up the curve. If it's new franchise training, get them up the curve as quickly as possible. If it's individual coaching, it's trying to figure out, asking questions, trying to really dive into better understand what that issue is and where it could be. And, in my experience, it's typically not just one thing. It's two or three things that make up that challenge.
You're playing psychologist in so many ways when you're supporting franchisees. And if I recall, you probably started out having, maybe 20 franchisees that you were responsible for. And then did we have another business coach at that time when you first started, or were you it?
We did. There were two others.
Okay. So there was three of you all together.
Three of us together, yeah.
Okay. Because I remember we had three. I didn't realize we had three as far back as '06. And then the responsibility as we're growing, because you came in during a really high growth phase. That 2006, 2007, 2008, we were opening 30, 40 locations a year. Yeah. So how do you as a business coach be able to navigate having that many franchisees come aboard while maintaining the existing level of support, that you could provide? What would you say?
Yeah, you continually learn, and you lean on people that have been there before, whether it's other franchise owners, and you get their insight and what they're doing and how they have tackled those things. But you continually develop, and I think in that time we went from a business that was focused on running sports to a business that was focused on the business of running sports. And that was a big change. And when we made that, we saw a ton of success, but it didn't happen overnight. It took a long time to get that in.
Right.
We went through the E-Myth, and I think that was one of the biggest things that we did. We adopted the training of the E-Myth and help coach our owners on, you don't want to work in the business, you want to work on the business. And that transition was a very big one for us at the time.
In fact, I will be so bold to say that probably the biggest frustration that we all had, and I take full responsibility and ownership for it, was that I don't think early on we communicated the importance of scale. Because what would happen is franchisees would open one location and they would start working it themselves, right? And then we would see the numbers, they're not happy with the results. And you and I would say, or the other coaches, we would all say,
it's simple.
Yeah, you need to get to the three locations to be profitable. And that was the challenge, is that they would say, but I can't be at two places at once. And we had to it was a shift from them from being at the field and working in the business, right? To hiring, having systems and processes, and having the three locations, because then it was a game changer for our business. Then we started seeing some real numbers and some real growth.
Yeah, I agree. From my perspective, we need to set the systems to be able to run the leagues. So that became easy. We spent a lot of time early on training that. training, how do you mark a field? How do you set up the field? How do you direct parents? Where do you put the signs? All that stuff. And for the first, 1 or 2 years of a franchisee's career with us, we were teaching them those type of things. When we developed the training program that really took us through everything, early on, it got us to the coaching phase quicker. And that made it easier for us to have those kind of conversations. You know, the conversations weren't all about the how, they became more about the why.
Yes. If we would have started with the why from the very beginning and then the how, we probably wouldn't have, I wouldn't have had as much gray hair as I have today. What tools do you think were most valuable for you to support franchisees, and also maybe what tools would you suggest to an emerging franchisor? Like, you really have to, your coaches really need these things.
Yeah. So early in my career, when I was coaching, I realized a couple very important things that I still focus on today. I coached elite youth and professional soccer players, and especially the pros. They were hard. They were difficult people to deal with. I was not their main coach, so I couldn't say, do this or I'm going to bench you. They typically came to me in rehab or in the off season and worked through some things. So if I wanted those players to do something, I had to get them to buy in, and I had to get them to trust me. And then the holy grail became, how can we make it their idea? And I worked with a bunch of sports psychologists where I was, and it was really cool to pick up some of these habits from them. But I didn't realize how important that would be to the rest of my career. So bring that to I9 Sports, it was really pretty interesting. The tools that we created led them on a journey. So it was, rather than saying, here are your numbers, go do this, we created a financial pro forma that said, put in your numbers that you really want, and let's figure out how many locations, whatever it needed to be to get there, how many sports, where were you going to do this? And it filtered through to show them their bottom line. We created a lot of tools like that. We created a staffing model that we inventoried all of the different roles that would take to run the business. And then we led them on an exercise of, now take all these roles and put them into different columns to figure out what works for you. And I think that model really helped us develop buy-in. You know, when we can get people to, especially put down their dreams on paper, they and ones that they create versus ones that are given to them, that creates an awesome way to hold them accountable going forward. If we say you need the staff and you need X, Y, and Z, well, that's us telling you what you need. By creating a staffing model that made it more of a self-serve, more of a, I could have a hybrid of this person and this person because I'm really good at this and I love this. Let me do that. A franchise owner is more committed when it's their idea. So the holy grail in business coaching and my idea is, how can we get you to say, I want to change and this is what I want to do, and then support the heck out of them.
That is brilliant, Scott. That is absolutely brilliant, because basically that's what franchising it is. You have these guardrails that we're staying within, but you're ultimately helping them to achieve their dream without you ramming it down their throat. And it is challenging sometimes because you want somebody to win so bad. You see that there's a franchisee who has all the makings of being great, and then you see that they keep getting in their own way. And we do that, I think, just naturally as humans. We're like, I want to help you. Here's what you need to do, but that doesn't help them. Like, to your point, it has to be their idea. It's sort of maybe in some ways a parent relationship, child relationship. I know if I tell my kid what to do, it's a little more difficult than when it's their idea.
I have to remember that a lot.
Oh, yes, I bet. Having two girls, I bet. What would you say, though, was probably one of the more difficult parts of your job as a franchise business coach, and how'd you tackle it?
Head on. I'll start with that side of the answer.
Yeah.
Any difficult things, I found, rip off the Band-Aid and go right at it. As far as the difficult parts of the job, I knew what my strengths were, and I had a lot of weaknesses. I had holes that I didn't know. Give you a good example. I didn't know financial management. And at one point, you or someone said, hey, we need you to lead this project. And I had to figure it out pretty darn quick. So, taking something that you don't understand, fully immersing yourself and trying to figure it out because it's beneficial to the business.
I probably one of the many things that I could have done better would have been if I was going to have a team of, say, the 3 business coaches, bring in individuals that were really different, that had a different skill set that they could bring to the table. And maybe if I do it all over again, it would be bringing somebody in with a financials are their strength. Somebody else that the psychology of coaching is their strength. Maybe somebody else that the fundamentals of running a successful business would be another great attribute. And then you bring that team together and they're sharing ideas and they're creating best practices.
Absolutely.
And I think that what I did early on was I kept going back to the well to people that, had the sports background. And fortunately for me, you had the wherewithal to say, I'm going to take my sports background, but I can apply it to business. But that doesn't always happen, of course.
I would assume early on you're not going to get that polished individual. You're going to get someone who has something, and you have to develop other pieces of it. I also feel developing certain areas are more difficult than others. Learning how to understand a P&L, it's just time and energy to figure it out. It's not rocket science.
Right.
You don't need to understand it at the level of a CPA. You need to understand it at the level that will help the business succeed and help the franchisee succeed.
What would you say is probably one of the most rewarding aspects of your time at I-9?
100% the relationships. It's unique being a business coach. You get to see people, warts and all. People open up when you're doing it right. How often you go walk down the street and say, how much money did you make this year? Right. That question alone is kind of off-putting to people.
Sure.
But those are just normal questions that you have with franchise owners. So there's a strong connection. And if you don't have a passion for that strong connection, I think you'll struggle.
Yeah. Well, one of the conversations that you and I would have on a regular basis, a couple times a year, was the importance of that face-to-face time with the franchisee. Remember, what would you and I say if too much time went by?
Yeah.
You remember?
I don't remember exactly, but I know it would go south.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
It's kind of like a dating relationship.
Yes.
The further you are away, the less you talk, the more the mind goes into different spots on both sides.
Right.
And now the franchisor doesn't care about me or whatever it may be. So yes, it always goes a little south.
Yeah, I mean there were times where you would say, I got to get out. I've got to go see this person and that person and that person because we just need face-to-face time. Yeah. There's just something about that business coach franchisee relationship of having that personal time with them together, not just in their business, talking about business, but the family side of it too.
Oh, absolutely.
Leading up to a national convention, we did it every year where we would do a regional meeting and we would always say we got to get to this meeting because it's been too much time. I think there was once that we went 2 years. Yeah. And we felt, you could just feel the energy was off because there was not enough face time that we had with them.
Yeah, no, it's incredibly important. I mean, today we have things like Zoom and Teams to jump on and kind of feel a little bit more of that bond. And back then it was phone calls, and it's just so much different when you're in person. Yeah.
Is there any piece of advice that you would give to an emerging founder that hasn't made that hire yet into business coaching on what they should do?
Jump in and find someone that can relate to people. I think in my experience that's been the most important attribute that I had. Find someone that fits your team chemistry. Find someone that's loyal and that's going to fight to the end of earth for you, because those are the people you're going to rely on.
Yeah. Is there looking back, is there any advice that you wish I had given you when you first started out as a franchise business coach that I didn't?
Yeah, I had a desire to know it all and to figure it out quickly, and that's not the way the world works. So patience, I think, is the biggest thing. So yeah, just patience.
So tell me some things you learned early on in the process.
Yeah, you learn a lot from the conversations you have with the franchise owners, and I remember working with a business owner who's an ex-high school basketball coach, athletic director, great guy. He knew a lot of the X's and O's and what to do with running leagues. His wife was a little more demanding. She was a VP of a credit card company. And I remember the conversation where I wasn't fully prepared for it, But when I had this conversation, they grilled me on systems and processes. Why didn't we have XYZ ready? Why didn't we have a roadmap for this? Why didn't we have a talk sheet for this? And I took that to heart. And that really taught me that, yes, you work for the franchisor, but you're an advocate for the franchisee.
Yes.
And I would say probably 49% franchisee advocate, 51% franchisor advocate. Just tilted a little bit to that side of it. Because as a business coach, you're the closest to what's going on in the field, and you need to be able to bubble up where the challenges are. So yeah, I took that to heart and came back and we developed some of those processes that she did.
And she was right, by the way.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
100%. We needed those things,
Yes.
those checklist items for them to say, yes, we got it. And that's, where we can transition to bigger conversations. That conversation was in the weeds. Didn't really want to have it. I want to be able to say, here, take this book and that'll show you it. And let's move on to something else. So yeah, taking those early conversations and really learning from them. I also had another franchisee. I'm not sure if you'll remember this one. A gentleman in California who had a couple pretty nasty complaints into the home office.
Okay.
And
in Southern California.
That area.
Yeah.
And I remember having the conversation with him.
Yeah.
And it took me aback. The conversation ended up going, it feels like you have a customer experience problem.
Oh.
And his response blew me away.
What was it?
How do you know you're not there?
Oh.
And
boy.
I just said, yes, you're right. I wasn't there. So that really taught me something. Don't go into these conversations with I feel. Go into these conversations with data. Go into these conversations with third-party data, especially to be able to have a conversation that is right, wrong, or indifferent. We're getting feedback from the customers that say X, Y, and Z. Let's work through that and make it better. I learned at that moment that franchisees can get emotional, especially if you accuse them of things. And that's not a good feeling.
Right.
So backtracking that, it's how to have those conversations, and you learn from each of those ones that you have, and you go, okay, I'm not going to do that again. I'm going to do something else.
Right. All right. Well, this is a perfect segue to talk about customer feedback. So, Scott, I'm not going to lie, it's a little odd sitting across from you. Neither one of us are wearing an I9 Sports logo. I never envisioned us ever wearing two different logos, not even on the same team, but that's the beauty of franchising, right? And it is such a close-knit industry. And we get to remain dear friends. But after 10 years at I9 Sports, you moved on to Listen 360, and we were a client of Listen 360. So why don't you share with the audience what Listen 360 is in case they don't know?
Yeah. So we are a software platform that helps businesses track, analyze, and manage the customer experience. We do it through connecting with your CRM, your POS, your franchise management system, whatever it is, to trigger at customizable points surveys. And we ask two very simple questions. The first one is, how likely would you be to recommend? That's known as the ultimate question, otherwise known as the net promoter question. Okay. And then we follow up that question with another one that basically says why. And that gives us open-ended comments, key drivers of that person's experience with the business to be able to mine. And we're able to go through all of that data and help businesses transform what they do. We also then are able to ask the customers to leave a review. We can leave reviews on sites like Facebook and Google. Most people obviously choose Google for the search rank portion of it. But we help generate leads of new customers based on what prior people are saying.
So the beauty of it, again, is you take out the I think or I feel and customer data, because data doesn't lie. There's no emotion to tied to data.
Absolutely. Can
you share, again, the audience, I'm not sure how familiar they are with Net Promoter Score. So can you share what is NPS?
Yeah, Net Promoter Score revolutionized the world 10, 15 years ago. It was created after a decade of research done by Fred Reichheld and his colleagues at Bain & Company. They were trying to uncover what makes a successful, fast-growing company tick, and how could they predict that. And what was really interesting to them is it wasn't this set of survey questions like they thought. It really ended up being one single question that could predict loyalty, and loyalty was what really brought that to the surface. So that question that they landed on is, how likely would you be to recommend?
We're taking out the franchisee's opinion of, I feel like, and now it's data that's driving the results.
100%. Your customers tell you what's going on and how to react.
Right. And I think the other thing that's so critical of Listen 360, having that data, is now we can better coach franchisees, because if we start to get a lot of common threads. It's one thing to get a comment, let's say, I'm going to go back to the I9 Sports days, where we got a customer maybe gave us a 5 because their kid got bit up by red ants. I think you probably remember that one. And the franchisee was livid. They were so upset. They're like, I put my heart and soul into this business, and they gave me a 5 because their kid got bit up by red ants. Like, I can't control that. You throw that out. We understand there are anomalies, but when we see too many comments from a customer that says the coaches weren't good, or it was very disorganized, I didn't know where to go, it's those things where we're really honing in on. It's not that we're nitpicking each individual result. And if I can be so bold as a franchisor that used the service to say that I didn't want to use Listen 360's data as a stick. It was more of an encouragement tool to say, hey, here's what's going on. One more thing I do want to add would be, if there was a franchise owner that liked to complain about a lot of things, that my customers, it's different here. Once all the other franchisees in the network saw everybody's results, it disarmed a franchise owner that was constantly complaining about their customers, because it was like, okay, nobody else is having this problem around the country. Maybe it's you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Listen 360 provides a platform to be able to better understand individual location challenges and successes, but then also aggregate that data across your entire network.
So Scott, why would an emerging franchisor, some franchisor that only has a couple units open, why would they use Listen 360?
Well, it's never too early to start good practices.
Right.
Most franchisors come to us for 2 reasons. Number one, a bit out of fear. Starting a business and being completely in control of the experience when you have 1 or 2 locations is comfortable and you know what you're doing. Once you scale, that experience is now in the hands of your franchisees. And that's a big challenge for a lot of franchisors. So our system gives you the ability to be able to see that across all locations and keep an eye on things. Is someone kind of going rogue? Are they going out of the box a little bit? And you'll see that in some comments. We survey every single customer. So if there is a problem, it's going to arise, and you're going to see, are they doing something they shouldn't be? Are they, not responding to situations early enough? Are they not living up to your brand standards?
Yeah.
So we give you the ability to look into each individual operation and see what's going on. And that's incredibly important to most franchisors.
Yeah.
The other side is to be able to understand aggregated data and learn what's going on, rather than putting through a once-a-year survey where it takes months and months and months to collect the data and then take all that information in and then analyze it, and 3-4 months later you're acting upon it. Our system continually updates and sends surveys. You're just getting that feedback in over and over again. And as soon as you want to ask a question, you go into the reports and you find that answer. So understanding aggregated data is important. Lastly, running a franchise or setting up a franchise is all about systems and processes. And, how can you process every bit of the business out? Listen 360 is a process in a box. We're going to help you manage the customer feedback process, manage the experience, give your franchise owners the tools to reach out and make it right if it is a challenge. So if there are any negative surveys, they're going to get alerted right away and prodded to go out and make it right. We're going to help you set up those processes. We're going to help you understand aggregated data and what's going on big picture. And we're going to help you manage each location so that they provide an excellent experience.
Awesome. So, okay, now I'd like for you to integrate your franchise business coaching mind with your Listen 360 hat. Yeah. And that is, how do you, as the franchisor, coach the franchisee when you have to explain to them tell them that their baby is ugly? That there's a problem, and you have to still have that empathy, but help them initiate change. How do you do that?
Yeah, and I think I've used that story over and over again of the baby being ugly. I had a franchise owner early on in their career come to me and say, every time I get a feedback that's negative, it's like they're punching me in the gut and telling me my baby is ugly. Yeah. And I think that resonated with me. They put their blood, sweat, and tears into this business. Yeah. So regardless of what it is, they're not trying to mess up the experience. Mistakes happen. And, taking feedback, understanding that it's a gift. People don't have to tell you. They can just go off and, go to another business and leave you. But understanding that feedback coming in is someone screaming for help, saying, hey, I haven't had a great experience and I want to make it, I want it to be better. Oftentimes, owners will respond to feedback through our system, and the response from the customer will be, oh my gosh, I had no idea you even read it.
Yes, and I remember those comments.
That is a great thing because regardless of what happened, big picture, they know you care. And I've been in the survey business now for 7-8 years. I have never gotten a call back from anyone. And I've taken a lot of surveys just to see what's going on. By empowering our franchise owners that use our system to respond, it really does make it right. And it creates a culture of, we're going to mess up from time to time, but we're going to make it up to you. And that's how you create a customer for life. Sure. That's how you get a child to play from 3 to 12 or 14 or whatever it is.
Right. I don't mean to intend on this being a commercial for Listen 360, but I'm going to make this a commercial about Listen 360 in that you have to remember, if you're an emerging franchisor and you're brand new and you have only 5 locations, remember how we talk about this, on past shows that, your first 10 franchisees are critical to getting the culture right. And who are your first dozen franchisees? It's going to be franchise owners that are risk takers. Are those the franchisees that are really adhering to tight systems and processes, or are they kind of doing things within the guardrails? But a lot of times they're doing things on their own because you as the franchisor don't have all the systems and processes in place that you need to. By using Listen 360 from the very, very beginning, you're getting the customer feedback, not using, anecdotal stories as proper
gospel.
Yeah, we can't. No, we don't. We can't use the one-off, as gospel. But I think that it is critically important to you getting customer feedback from the very beginning, because then you can make the changes faster. I would have made so many more changes quicker because I didn't really know what some of the problems were, down to different parts of the business. Like maybe, for example, we were really good at flag football, but we weren't so good at basketball in the beginning. And we didn't know until we got customer feedback. Well, I could have saved ourselves a lot of headache if I would have used, a Listen 360 type product and getting that customer feedback much earlier on. So I don't think it's ever too early to using this company or, using a product like this. So Scott, how many franchisor clients do you guys have?
Yes, we work with over 300 franchisors.
So that's about 10% of the entire industry.
Sure. Yeah, we're huge in the service-based industries. So not as big in restaurants, but anything from fitness to dog care to children to home care.
Share some stories of working with some of the franchisors.
Yeah, I'll start with my own experience or our own experience. Yeah. Back in the day, we looked at NPS, or Net Promoter Score, by sport. And all of our sports were pretty good, except for one. I don't know if you remember, it was basketball.
Yes.
Basketball was a little lower, so maybe 10 points below our other scores of other sports. And we dug into all the feedback and tried to understand really what was going on. And we started breaking it down by age group. And that's where the aha moment came.
Yes.
So we realized that 3, 4, and 5-year-old basketball was scoring much below the other age groups. The other age groups were probably in line with their other sports. And it was that aha moment of, well, heck, basketball is more difficult for younger children. Maybe the hoops were a little high at some locations. Maybe that would have helped. But in general, it's just a higher skill set. And one kid can, take it by the scruff and run the game themselves. So what we did as a franchisor is say, you know what? We don't want our experience, the first experience a 3-year-old has with I9 Sports, being a challenging one. We're going to stop offering 3 and 4 and 5-year-old basketball leagues. And that was a scary moment for me anyway. So I remember, talking about it at a national convention. And one particularly challenging franchise owner came up to me and said, "You're taking money out of my pocket." So, well, tell me more. What's going on? By not allowing me to run basketball at 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, that's my whole program. So we said, let's look at the data, and we'll get back to you. We scheduled a call for the following week. Looked into his registration data, and yeah, it was like 90% 3, 4, and 5-year-olds.
And how good was his net promoter score?
Well, that's the next step. So then we looked at the net promoter score, and it was horrible.
Oh,
way down low.
okay.
So then the conversation was, much less emotional of, yes, we are taking money out of your pocket, but let's reframe what we're looking at here. Yes, you have a ton of kids playing that sport. The net promoter scores and the feedback is coming in. It's really, really low. It was low for him even.
And the customers weren't going to come back. They weren't coming back either.
And that was the end of, well, do you want to lose that customer for life? Or would you rather transition them into a sport that's more conducive for younger kids to play? And it was really an example of taking data and having the conversation that was less emotional and what was right for the business. So that was one example.
Well, Scott, I want to drill into that further, because what you're really saying is it's one thing to get Listen 360 feedback, but it's another thing to actually look at the feedback and then drill into it and start to find what are the common threads. Because if we had just seen feedback overall, we'd be like, oh, well, basketball, it's just lower. Maybe it's too difficult for us to operate, or maybe it's just not in our wheelhouse. But it took you drilling down into the specific age group to finally identify that problem. So are there other clients that you have where they have to drill in further? Can you give us maybe some other examples on how drilling into it gets them the diagnose where the problems are?
Yeah. Sometimes you start by not knowing the questions to ask, and you just kind of poke around and try to figure out what's the data saying. Other times you start with a question because you have this burning issue with your franchise network. So I work with a home services company that was having some challenges around the idea of pricing. They had a lot of mom and pop conversions that came in with the last year or so.
And that's a challenge in itself.
Absolutely. Change. So they were getting them to charge more.
Right.
So it was a top of mind. They were getting ready for national convention. So I worked with the president of this brand and dug into all the data, all the comments to try to figure out, what's going on with pricing? Where's the challenge? Are they not selling it properly or whatever it may be? And interestingly enough, sometimes it's the absence of data that really tells you the story. So as we looked at the total thousands and thousands of comments, only 2% of them mentioned price.
Wow.
And then as you looked at those comments, 40% of that 2% were positive.
Interesting.
So just over 1% of the comments were negatively talking about price.
So this was really ultimately about change.
Yes.
That's what this whole thing was really about.
So this brand president was at their national convention, shared all this information, and asked their franchise network, do we have a problem with price? And everyone said no, absolutely not.
Wow.
So it really took data to, have someone see the forest through the trees.
It's the only time I feel like you can get through some of those difficult conversations is, again, taking the emotion out of it and using data to at least drive the conversation. Because once you have the data, like we said, data doesn't have any emotion tied to it, right? It is what it is. It's numbers. But what I like is that you pointed out it's not just getting the feedback, it's drilling into it. And so does Listen 360 do that? If I have my account rep, are they working with me, rolling up the sleeves and kind of figuring out like?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So Listen 360 reps, they're not experts in your business, but they're experts in the system. So they'll work with some of your team to go through and better understand the data. So they'll ask questions and figure out where to drill further and further in. I also work with a rather large haircutting franchise. And one of the things that was really interesting about this brand is they would do audits. So they'd have someone come in with a checklist and say, did the person do this? Did the stylist do this? It was very, checklist driven. What they found, and by the way, I don't remember the details, but let's just say an 80% on this checklist was passing.
Okay.
What they found out was the higher the person was on the checklist, the lower their weekly revenue and their retention of customers was. As long as it was above an 80, they didn't really care. But they also saw the higher that number, the the less retention and less weekly revenue they would generate.
Wow.
What they found out was the higher the NPS, as long as they were above the 80% threshold, the dramatically more revenue weekly and retention. And what that tells you is business is about customer interactions, customer connections. Those stylists that were focused just on the checklist items probably weren't having a good conversation, weren't connecting with the person in their chair.
Right. So if the checklist question was, did I get greeted? Hello, welcome to XYZ shop. Check.
Absolutely.
That's not, that does not have the same feeling.
That's a connection.
As the connection and truly having a conversation with them, right?
Absolutely. So this brand transitioned their training to more of the soft skills.
Wow.
And saw a jump in their revenue.
Well, that's really what what Listen 360 is really all about. It's developing the soft skills for the franchisee and their staff, I think.
Yeah, we say we're a communication company.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What's been your biggest surprise in franchising overall? Combine all your time, I-9, Listen 360. What's been one of the biggest surprises for you think?
Yeah. So this is one I've thought a little bit about. And I learned this early on and have kind of developed my understanding of this over time.
Okay.
Number one, franchising is all about a relationship. And the relationship is about personal connections. However, the franchisor's goal is also scale. And scale completely contradicts those personal connections. It puts processes in place to have those communications.
True.
And it really is the franchisors that do it well balance both of those things. So they have systems and processes to train to get them franchisees up the curve and focus on scale of the details.
Right.
But then commit to personally understanding the needs of each franchisee.
Right. So it's really a pendulum.
Very much.
That as a franchisor, if you go too far to systems and processes and lack the personal connection, you're going to get in trouble.
Absolutely.
And if you go way on the other side to all personal connection and no systems and processes, you're going to have an absolute, insanity. It's going to be
hard to scale. You can't please
anarchy.
everyone.
It's going to be anarchy, right? So you can't do that. But it is taking the two most important aspects, which is the systems and processes and the people, and staying within balance.
Absolutely. And as a franchise network matures, it's going to take different things to get people engaged. Some of those older franchisees, the personal interaction may not be there as much.
Right.
So you have to have peer groups or different leadership groups to help them, really understand what's going on and connect with the brand.
Sure. Scott, if someone was interested in learning more about Listen 360, how can they get more info?
Yeah, our website is listen360.com and a ton of information there. Book a demo and get more information on that website.
Awesome. All right. And I always finish with this thing called the tip jar because our community is so generous. I don't know if you've given this any thought yet, but what would be some of the best practices or wisdom that you would want to share with a franchisor that's starting out? Maybe they're right where you were when you started with I-9 Sports. They were a couple years in and they were a little bit of a mess.
Yeah.
What advice would you give that founder?
Well, Frank, I'm gonna give you kudos for setting up an organization that focused on the franchisee and tried to do everything right every single time.
Oh, thanks.
I won't say that always did it right. There were some bumps along the way. However, it's very easy to get an organization moving in the right direction if they understand why you're doing something and the guidelines are, let's do it for the best of the franchisee. If the franchisee is profitable, if the franchisee is successful, and that doesn't happen overnight, and it takes dedication to stick on that. But if your goals are to do things the right way, your staff understands it a little bit better, and it's easier to predict what the answers would be because it's not mystery. We're doing things the right way, and this is how we're going to do it, and it's easy to follow and easy to say, if Frank was here, what would he do? And he'd do the right thing. So let's do that too.
Oh, Well, thank you, Scott. I'd say that I really appreciate that. And it is easier when you focus on doing the right thing. And at the same time, we know we did this together. Sometimes there's a challenge of doing what's right instead of what's popular. But if you have your heart in the right direction, and you have to be able to explain your decisions, right? And we made a lot of decisions together, and God knows the company got where it did back then because we did more things right than wrong, but we made a lot of mistakes. But dude, we were never, ever afraid to fix them quickly. We did not make the same mistake twice, generally speaking. And we learned from them and we moved on. Scott, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for everything. You played such a pivotal role in the company, and I kid you not, I've told many people again, you are on my Mount Rushmore of I9 Sports, and I just can't thank you enough for everything.
Feels like home.
Yes. Well, thank you, Scott. Appreciate it. Thank you for tuning into the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. For additional insights, guest applications, and to stay connected, visit us at efbpodcast.com. The Emerging Franchise Brands podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent those of Emerging Franchise Brands, its host Frank Fiume, or Emerging Franchise Group, LLC. Any discussed franchise or investment opportunity requires thorough investigation, obtaining proper disclosure documents, and expert consultation before making any investment decisions. The podcast and its host do not offer professional advice or endorsements, and they hold no responsibility for actions, representations, accuracy, or consequential damages related to the podcast content.